and welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals from multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you're joining us on Facebook, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and follow our page to stay updated with content that will help you manage your money. I'm your host, Pauline Joseph, and with Father's Day right around the corner, we're shifting focus to an important part of the conversation, the role of fathers in shaping financially smart children. Today's episode is all about practical lessons, real experiences, and the tools dads can use to guide the next generation. So we're asking the big question: how can fathers teach kids about money in Trinidad and Tobago? So today we're joined by two amazing fathers. We have Jason Julian. He is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer, Business Generation at First Citizens. Welcome, Jason.
Hi,
As well as Kerri Maharaj. He is the CEO of the Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation, which I'm pretty sure we've had so many questions on this show about unit trust. So we look forward to getting all the questions today and getting some answers. But first, we need to address a bit of a conversation that happened under Jason's photo. We were we were being corrected as his title, so I just want him to clear that up for our audience. Jason.
So I mean, it's strange kind of to talk about yourself in this forum in that way. It really have nothing to do with fathers and kids and learning to use money wisely. But I guess I gotta get it all the way. So my current job title is Group Deputy CEO, Business Generation. But that title is part of a process. So essentially, we as First Citizens would have announced that I'm going to be the next CEO upon the retirement of our current CEO. And there's a timeline and a process involved. And so Karen, who is still our CEO, she's still leading us into this new financial year. Upon her retirement, which is next year, I will be the successor. And so you can expect a couple of things. Over the next couple of months, I'm going to have to replace myself to find someone to take this seat and this role. And then I move into a box called CEO Designate. And then we do the discipline thing. We hand over, so I hand over both upwards and downwards. And we then have a process of transition, which will take us, I suspect, to maybe May 2026.
Okay.
So it's going to be fun times at First Citizens, but we wanted to do the discipline thing and let the market know ahead of time so that we have a managed, expected discipline process over the next couple of months.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that explanation, Jason. And we just want you guys to know we do read your comments, and that's why we wanted to address that as soon as. So let's get into the topic of discussion today, and we're going to ask Kerri, how early did you start talking to your children about money, budgeting, and saving? Because I feel like that's something, as an adult now, in hindsight, I was like, I wish people were having this discussion with me when I was 3. So let us know, Kerri, what's the insight there?
Okay, thanks a lot, Pauline, and let me just say a wonderful good morning to everyone, or good day to everyone on this very rainy day. So I started, and I know it's about fathers, but really this is done together with my wife. But we started talking to my son. So I have one son. He's currently 14. We started talking to him about money really early, actually. I would say somewhere around probably 6 to 8, if my memory serves correctly. I think prior to that, what we really tried to inculcate in him is that things need to be earned. And so while it wasn't about money, because I think prior to 5, 6 years old, it's a difficult concept for them to grasp. But what we try to focus him on is you need to earn things. You have to do something to earn things. So, for example, if he did well in school, he got a good grade on something, or he did good on project, he would actually earn something. And that became the introduction to the discussion we eventually had about money. And I think it turned into a more dollars and cents discussion, probably around that age of 6 to 8 years old.
All right, that's a great way to start the idea of earning money, because usually that's a sign of, we think about allowances and you do this so you get this. So Jason, can you chime in as to any suggestions on tools or methods that have worked with you and your child?
No, of course, of course. So I love how Kerri started off his conversation by saying, on this rainy day, and I immediately smiled because I said, well, what how topical, because we're going to talk about saving for a rainy day. So pun intended. So what I would say is this, I think even recognizing there's a need for a conversation is the start. From my experience, when you talk to families, you talk to professionals, you talk to individuals, you talk to communities, money always feels taboo, or the management of money always feels taboo. So I think the starting point, and Kerri kind of touched on it, is conversation, making it feel comfortable, normal, everyday, and part of the expected conversation for a family. And I think, and to me, that is the starting point, because unless you're comfortable having a conversation and it doesn't feel as though it's something scary, then anything else that follows will be difficult. So I think even that's the mere fact, the same way you can talk about the weather, or you turn on the news and talk about what's happening in a current event, or you talk about a sport or a game or a show or a cartoon or a funny movie, money should be part of the conversation. And it shouldn't feel as though it only happens in the context of a challenge or the context of a crisis. But it should be everyday life. And those moments happen organically. So a simple thing as we're going to buy ice cream on a weekend. While you're picking your flavors, we should talk about, okay, well, what's the cost of the ice cream? And then there's a lot of organic things that happen even in that, right? There's stories. If you go to, and I don't want to pick on any one brand, if you go to Häagen-Dazs, they could talk about, well, how does this business work? Even while eating ice cream. And then in talking about how this business works, you can talk about, well, why the ice cream costs this amount? Where does the ice cream come from? What are the ingredients? So you talk about money in the context of life, a business, manufacturing, and a product. So it doesn't just feel like something in isolation, but it feels like connected parts or the connected tissue to all aspects of life. And it is in small ways. You don't make it seem as though there's a lesson being had, but it becomes more as to the insight of a conversation. And that's true for not just ice cream, it's true for the doubles man, it's true for KFC, it's true for when they go to the grocery at a mountain, it's true for when they sign up in the cinema line. Every aspect of life, that connective tissue of money and commerce exists. So it shouldn't feel as though it's something far away. It should feel as though it's something that is utilitarian and as common as the air that we breathe. And to me, just that tone is the starting point. And once you get that tone right, and you yourself as an adult, I see many professionals struggle with that, because they themselves, they may be doctors and lawyers and engineers and done quite well in their profession. But when you talk to them about the dollars and cents of a thing, you can see the fear in the eyes. So that's why I'm starting with, let's practice every day the simple things. In every little moment of life, let's have the little life lesson. And that comfort around just making it normal then makes any lesson that goes after that common and acceptable, and doesn't feel as though it's something scary. It just feels like, hey, we just having a conversation about the doubles man. And where does the channel and Barra come from?
That's such great insight, Jason. And I just want you to know, if anybody had any question on who's our guest today, that dad joke earlier was definitely a clear indication that we have two fathers on this live show today, right? Jason just expanded on a question I asked, and I want to follow up with Kerri, because, the idea of money, money is a fact. It's not a suggestion, it's not a feeling, it's not a belief. But when it comes to our culture in Trinidad and Tobago, I grew up with, don't worry about that. But the reality is I ended up worrying about it and then not being able to manage it very well. So just piggybacking off of what Jason said about having those conversations about ice cream, can you elaborate on your experience and how you will see that evolve when it comes to the emotional relationship with money? Because being in the space in unit trust, and that's a space that you manage, so you have a more analytical approach. But going across to the side of being a parent, how do you see that importance? Because then that child becomes an adult. That adult has to go to have a job, and then now has to have the, it's like, how do I process my life if I don't have the tools to do it?
Yeah, so Pauline, that's a great question, and it's quite a wide-ranging one. So I want to just start off with where Jason ended, or Jason's substantive point, which is making it a conversation that's a natural one, and I think that is really, really critical. So when we encounter these situations where we need to make money decisions, we absolutely should be involving our children in that discussion and explaining to them why you could choose one thing over another, or why we can't afford something versus another one. So it really should be, and I love the word that Jason used, an organic discussion, right? Now, the reality is, though, that I love the word that you chose, which is, the emotions of money. And I think it's important that we all recognize that, yes, you might believe that you require some sort of special skill or special educational background to understand money and to be able to succeed. And that is absolutely not the case, because a lot about money and money decisions are really grounded in emotions and are grounded in our own personalities. And which is why it is so important to establish that for our children, so that they have that proper relationship with money. And I'll give you an example, right? So I have such a distinct memory of my mother, who's now deceased, but she's somebody who she didn't have any kind of special educational background. I mean, this is 80 years ago. I think she probably at best had a primary school background, but yet she was able to guide the family into eventually owning their own home and being financially independent. So it has absolutely nothing to do with having any kind of particular educational skill set. But I would say that her understanding of money at an emotional level, in her own personality, was so spot on. Now, I would love to know how she learned these things to be able to make those decisions around what is appropriate. But it's such a lasting memory that I have, and I think that's such a key takeaway for anyone who's listening. That don't think that you need some sort of special financial skill. I think once you understand a few of the basics, and that you do try to have a grounded approach to it, success is right around the corner. And if we could teach our children those things, I'm guaranteed that they're going to be setting them up for their own success.
Thanks for that, Kerri. And shout out to Lisa, who's joining us from LinkedIn, as well as Linton is joining us from Facebook. So if you guys are experiencing any delay, I know we have some questionable weather in Trinidad, so just bear with us. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some childhood memories. I hope it doesn't trigger anything, too deep for us, but let's peel back some onions there and talk about some childhood mistakes. I don't know, some things that we learned that is now carrying on to adulthood. I'm sure you could relate. So we'll be right back.
Tired of feeling lost when it comes to your money? Want to make your money work more for you? Then tune in to Straight Off the Bat, brought to you by the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Every Monday at 8:30 p.m. on TV6, right after the news. We'll give you practical tools and strategies to help you manage your money wisely, from budgeting basics, debt management, to wealth creation. We'll cover it all. No jargon, Just Straight Talk. Join our host, Pauline Joseph, as she speaks to experts across the industry to empower you to take control of your money. Straight Off the Bat, Mondays at 8:30 p.m. on TV6. Brought to you by the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago.
And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand financial literacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're like Lisa, joining us from LinkedIn, don't forget to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing how can fathers teach children about money in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're joined by Jason and Kerri. Jason's Julian, he is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Business Generation at First Citizens, and Kerri Maharaj, he is the CEO of the Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation. So with this wealth of knowledge, we're going to try to have a conversation to educate fathers and mothers alike, who knows, because we have some comments in the section there. We're going to answer them. But we're going to focus right now on sharing maybe a personal mistake when you're younger. I have one that specifically has to do with Bigfoot snacks. It was my kryptonite, and any single money I got, that was where I was running to the shop around the corner. And I must say, as I evolve as an adult, I think my current kryptonite is cycling. So if I walk into a bike shop, I do not make financially sound decisions. So with that in mind, I'll start with Jason. Can you share a personal money mistake from your younger years that may have changed your financial philosophy?
Right. So I'll start by saying that I am not as perfect as Kerri. So bear with me. So I'll say this, right? So I remember growing up that, I grew up in the 80s, and that was a time for the younger folks on this call that Trinidad was going through a recession. So it would have meant that, everything at that time felt difficult around money. And my mom at the time, she was a public servant, and she was raising 3 kids on a public servant salary. And during that time, of course, for those who look back at the history, the country would have been going through a situation where the public servants were taking home less money, right? And of course, the cost of goods was skyrocketing. So one of the things that I found was that as a child growing up in that environment, it was immediately brought home to me that everything had, right? Go after nothing. It all had, and so that was the messaging, right? That every time you go into a grocery or you go anywhere, there's a feeling of it is too difficult, it is all expensive. But you never understood, well, why? Why it's expensive and why it hard, but you just knew the feeling and the tone at the time was everything hard, whatever we, so make the most of what we have, right? And so I remember once there was this weekend, and we had some ice cream in the fridge, and we would have bought the ice cream just that morning, and it was some homemade ice cream, right? And I mean, I love homemade ice cream, huh? And so we bought this homemade ice cream, and so we had a little extra money, and we went to buy the homemade ice cream, and we had some guests come over, right? Some of my cousins, so they came over to line that weekend, and my mom sent me in the kitchen and said, "Hey, bring on some homemade ice cream for them," right? And so she asked them if they wanted homemade ice cream, and they said, "Yeah, we have coconut. Everybody get coconut." So then she comes across and said, "Hey," two whispers in my ear, "Put it in the small cups, eh? Put the ice cream in the small cups." And when she talk about small cups, she talk about some really tiny minuscule cups. I'm scratching my head there in the kitchen and say, "Well, that's a small cup when you hold like one teaspoon of ice cream. That don't make no sense." But so I ignored her. So she's gone back out to the living room, and she's with the rest of the family online and stuff. So I immediately begin to put the ice cream generously in larger cups that come out and I hand out ice cream, and and everybody have a good time. And she watching me like, "That's not a small cup," but I didn't get it till after that one of the things she's trying to do is teach a couple of principles. One, the value of something, the value of what we had. And two, even in being generous, and you should be generous, and you should always be generous, even if you have little, that in being generous, you have to find the balance of being generous without cutting your nose to spite your face, right? And at the same time, in being generous, bless others, but, have enough for another day. So, because she's trying to teach that ice cream was meant to last, not just for that one weekend, but maybe for a couple of weekends. So, it always stuck with me. And so, it always stood out to me that moment where I understood the being generous part, but I didn't understand the value. And I didn't understand trying to take little and making much of it. But since then, that is one of the things that's always stayed with me.
Thanks for that lesson. I think a lot of us can relate to that, and it feels as though most of us have the same childhood, although you said it's the 80s. I think I'm a little younger. So some of the major takeaways I got from that is definitely your mom is teaching you something for adulthood, but also that you love ice cream. So with that said, I'm going to head over to Kerri and let him share his experiences in childhood.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Pauline. So, I've made so many mistakes when I was younger, and but I'll tell you one that I don't know if it's a mistake. I guess it could be characterized as a mistake, but it is such an enduring memory. So when I left high school, I wasn't able to afford to go to university immediately. So I had to start to work. And I remember, after getting paid for a couple of months, I just couldn't figure out why, if I'm getting paid on the 25th or the 26th of the month, by the time I pay the bills for the month, by the 28th or the 29th of the month, I run out of money. And I didn't have enough to get me through the month to come. I mean, when you get paid, ideally you would like to use that income to pay your expenses for the following month. But for the life of me, I couldn't understand why by the end of that month that I'm being paid, I'm practically out of money. And what I eventually realized, and the lesson that always stuck with me since then, and what I tried to pass on to my son, is the importance of knowing what you spend. And I've done a few sessions on financial topics with different people, and it is amazing how many people have really no idea what they spend. And they have a sense of they spend on groceries or they spend on rent or particular things, but if you ask them to put $1 to it, they can't. And that is what I remember so distinctly from when I started working. I'm talking about 1920, somewhere around there, right? And because of that lasting memory, I tried to make sure that as my son was growing up, is that he always had a handle on, or he tries to have a handle on, if you do get money, and I'm sure that's a question, Pauline, that you're going to come to at some point in time, that you need to make sure you understand where it is going. Don't just let it fritter away, but you make a conscious decision about what you want to spend that on. And so, like I said, I don't know if that's a mistake. I guess it could be a mistake in that, it was a bit of indisciplined spending. But as soon as I understood that, and I actually started paying attention to what I was spending and tracking what I was spending, because obviously at that age, the income is really, real small, right? It really set me on a path towards financial discipline, and it's a memory that has never escaped me.
Thanks for that, Kerri. And I remember when I used to live in England and my first paycheck and the amount of tax I was taking out, I was like, who is PAYE, and why do they need all of this money? But you're right, having those conversations are so important, not just for financial literacy and education, but just creating a relationship with money. So we're going to head to the comments because we have one from Stephanie on YouTube. Hello, Stephanie here. Two of my girls want to start a business to raise funds to purchase tablets. What advice would you give young, motivated children who are excited to make money? Who wants to take a crack at it?
Yeah, sure. So one, I commend her kids for being entrepreneurial. I think that is something that is a critical success factor for life. That full entrepreneurial thinking. So well done. And I think Desi after asking that question is, wow, a step in the right direction. In terms of you start the business, you know, I've seen so many creative ways they solve problems, right? So really, the beginning thing is what problem they could easily solve. You know, I've seen kids do things where they create stickers. So let's say there's anime right now, and this anime is popular in school, in their school. They create the anime stickers and they sell them for profit. And they, of course, take the funds and purchase the tablets. I've seen others where they find out a service to perform. So if that service is, you know, babysitting, I'm not sure what these kids are, right? Babysitting, doing chores, helping like clean up garages and storerooms, you know. But the core of the answer really is always finding a problem that needs a solution that they can easily lift and help solve. And that energy and that just being thinking, well, where is the opportunity? They will find it. I saw another one where some kids were making sandwiches to carry to school, and they were then selling it to their friends, and others where they were buying like bulk snacks and then repackaging the bulk snacks into smaller little things which are selling at a profit. So I think you know, honestly, and depends of course on the age of the kids. If they were into sports, they can help coach. If they were into academia, they can help tutor. So there's always a problem that needs solving. And if you could provide a solution, you could then be paid for that solution. And that causes that kind of entrepreneurial opportunity and drive.
Thanks for that, Jason. And I hope Stephanie can let us know at later dates what they decided to do, because I've seen some kids doing some things where, I mean, my brothers back in the day would draw, and they're very talented, and they will sell it to the kids in school. So there is opportunity everywhere. So when it comes to, these financial conversations and an entrepreneurial drive, can we look at the conversation around setting up investments? Because the idea of having a credit card, I remember when I was growing up, I would see my mom open her purse and did like 5 different cards, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I can't wait till I get that. And then when I do have this, now I have like, okay, I have to have an Excel spreadsheet. I have to budget these things. Like nobody was telling me what these cards represented. So when it comes to having those conversations, when do we start having those conversations with children? And when do we actually physically take them to the bank and say, okay, we're going to open this bank account for you? So Kerri, you want to start the conversation?
Sure, but do you mind if I just make a comment on the previous question though?
Sure.
So just firstly, so I want to absolutely endorse what Jason is saying about just keeping them motivated. So if your children are minded towards wanting to start a business, absolutely motivate them to do that, and also make sure that they know that it is a challenge to start something successful, to be successful with what you start. And if one idea doesn't work, don't be sad, don't be disappointed, but keep looking for the next idea, because who knows where the next brilliant sales idea will come from, and just let them keep trying. Failure is not an end, if I could use that word. It is just find the next thing, right? Keep them motivated. I think that's such an amazing thing, and the country needs young entrepreneurs, right? And they could start at any age. So Pauline, just going back to your specific question about the when do they start and how to start, I guess, if I could summarize it like that. Well, you mentioned investments, and I think it's instructive to think about one of the greatest investors of our time, who is Warren Buffett. And he said that he started investing in stocks. He purchased his first stock at 11 years old, and he bought 3 shares. Now, that's kind of mind-boggling when I think about it, because I don't think at 11 years old I even knew what a stock was, and certainly I probably didn't understand what that was in probably well into my 20s. So I guess the takeaway from that message from him is it's never too soon to start, and encourage them to do so. So occasionally I would hear my son talking about investing. I guess it's important that parents now understand and recognize that children get a lot of information on social media, and a lot of it is actually positive, and he's hearing about investing and investments and being able to make money through investing. And it's important that we channel those discussions into the right direction. So 1, never too early to start. 2, you mentioned about savings accounts, and it's very funny. It's very coincidental that I'm actually, talking to my son right now about, listen, I think it's time that you come to the bank with me and let's open an account in your name, so you can start developing a relationship with a bank. So I'll allow Jason to make a pitch at some point for First Citizen if he could get my business. But the point I wanted to make, though, is that it doesn't even necessarily need to be a bank at first. It can be something simple as just a cash pan. So my son has had cash pan savings for years, I think. And I think one mistake I made was, occasionally they would get some money when they, probably for birthdays or whatever, and we would take it, right? So he knows he got a gift, but we would hold on to the cash for him until one day we decided, wait a minute, why are we doing that? Let's let him get a cash pan, a physical cash pan, and let him put his money in it. So he learns that, when you get money, it needs to be put somewhere, and eventually we'd like that to be into a bank account. And he now also develops an understanding of what spending is. Spending is the physical act of handing somebody else your money. And you'll be surprised at the difference in mindset that creates when you have to use your own money to buy something, as opposed to your parents buying it and giving it to you, right? So certainly that can start very, very, very young. And from an investing perspective, I think, I have to fall back on Mr. Buffett in that start them as soon as you can. And I guess at this point, I'll put a small plug for the Unit Trust Corporation. So, Paulie, just a correction. I'm not sure if I heard you introduce me as the Chief Executive Officer, but I am the Chief Financial Officer. So I better correct that in case I need to go to Jason and ask him for a job. But I think institutions like the Unit Trust Corporation are critical for, to help your children start to understand what investing is and learning about investing. So, sorry, I would love to hear Jason's perspective on this if he has one.
Well, we're gonna put a pin on that just now because we have to go on a break, and you're absolutely right. Thank you for correcting me on that, and we will definitely for the next introduction, I will change it. So we're gonna go on a break, and when we come back, we're gonna elaborate on this conversation. And actually, I'm gonna go a little bit off script based on a comment that I see in the comment section of LinkedIn. So we'll be right back. welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand financial literacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're like Stephanie and you're joining us from YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we are discussing how can fathers teach children about money in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are joined by Jason Julian. He is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at within the business generation at First Citizens. And Kerri Maharaj, he is the CFO of the Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation. So if you miss any of the conversation we've had earlier today, once this live is ended, you could double check on YouTube and LinkedIn, and it will all be there, as well as we actually do have this is replayed on TV6 every Monday at 8 p.m. So before the break, we were talking about investing. So I just want to head over to the comments because Devindra is joining us in San Fernando on LinkedIn. And Shada Bahari has a comment, and I must have full transparency. I know this individual, and so does Jason. And she made a comment. I have a friend who does a really good job of planning trips and has become my kryptonite. Vacation without planning or paying an agent for planning. Take my money. Full transparency, that friend is me. So I love an Excel spreadsheet and I don't like wasting money, right? So I want to flip the script on this conversation, and I want to ask the importance of having friends and that conversation around money, because, you know, they say friends can take you, but a lot of them can't bring you back. Can you share some insight into, as a father, what type of conversations you have in that space and money? Jason, you understand?
I'm happy to do this. So you know, one thing I believe strongly is the community that you have. And a community can be defined small or big, right? And what happens in that space, it shapes you, right? And it's not just money, it's everything. It's your mindset, it's your habits, it is your character, it's who you are, it's what you become, right? So that phrase, birds of a feather flocks together, didn't originate out there anyway. It has meaning and truth in it. And likewise, when you hear comments like small minds talk about people and big minds talk about more strategic things, there's a truth to that as well too. So I would say that I enjoy having conversations that are meaningful, that have merit, that have impact, and that includes money. And it's not money only in the context of, you know, how you spend your money and what you spend your money on, but how you plan for the future. What when you talk about investments and opportunity, when you talk about business and ownership. So I've been fortunate, given my profession, given my circles, that I have had those conversations with the persons that that surround me and that are part of my circle. That we can talk about the fact that there's a distinction between being an employee and being an owner. And where does the freedom lie in that construct? You know, that freedom, I think you get more freedom in terms of ownership than you do in terms of being an employee. And that ownership, if you think about it long and hard, what it really is we use the word ownership in some circles, we use the word investment in other circles, right? So when you say you're an investor, it means that you actually own a piece of something that is valuable. So it could be an equity in a business, it could be a share of a mutual fund, it could be a share of a proportion of a bond, it could be having a private business that you own and run. So, or it could be a private business that you have your partner in, but ownership or investment in something that is valuable, whichever word you want to use, it effectively means the same. There is an opportunity there to create value for yourself in the long run. And each of the mechanisms that are described there, that value translates either, if it's a share of a company on a stock exchange, you can see the value every day when you look at the share price. If it is a bond, You could see the value over time as the bond pays you cash flows. And even the bond could have a different value and a market price. If it is a business, you could see the value of the ownership of that business as that delivers dividends, and that it increases market share, and that it increases revenue and profitability. So investment is a form of ownership. And I strongly believe that, especially in the circles that I sit in, that ownership is the pathway to financial freedom, time, leisure, and freedom, and more options and opportunity. Not just for yourself, but for your kids, for that generation and for generations to come. Because as you begin to own more, and it can be land, it can be a house, it can be a car, but anything that creates future value for you. And of course, in terms of property, it's easy to see that, right? The property prices can increase over time. In terms of rental out property, in terms of Airbnb or otherwise. In terms of a vehicle, if it is able to create cash flow for you, if you're renting out the car. So to me, there's opportunity in terms of owning an investment. There's the principle of it, and having conversations about those things identifies other types of opportunity. So that birds of a feather flocks together. It doesn't go away, and it's true, right? So we're talking if you're in a circle, we're talking about, where do we find opportunity? How do we build a business? Where do we put our money to make it work for us? Where what is the world out there? What is happening to Tesla share price and Nvidia? And what is a good ETF? And what do we do with the US dollar investments versus TT dollar investments? What is a good bond to invest in? When you open the papers and you see an IPO come out, what do you think about the price? How many shares make sense now? And so those types of conversations then make it normal, and it forces you to do research. So you then go and do your own research to understand, well, what is the nature of this investment opportunity? And you debate the difference, and they talk about it, they challenge each other. Those types of conversations create more value and create more opportunity in the long run.
Okay, so thanks for that, Jason. And I want to sort of evolve the question for Kerri, because you mentioned about social media. And, I can't imagine what it's like being a parent. Like, I have a cat, and that is enough for me. So as a father, you having a conversation with your children, but then they go on social media. So it's no longer just the friends that they keep, it's also the algorithm that they have. So how do you combat that conversation? How are you able to have a conversation within the money relationship space? Because let's be honest, social media is built for you to spend money because they want for you to take out your credit card and purchase things. So how do you have that conversation? Because it's no longer just about, okay, this friend that you have, I don't really like this, versus, well, this is what's happening on social media. Where do you start the conversation, Kerri? Give us some advice, especially as a CFO. I have way more weight now in this conversation.
Okay, Pauline, thanks a lot. So let me start with where Jason ended. So I did a presentation to some secondary school students and about money and financial literacy. And I had given them a couple pieces of advice when I ended off that presentation. And strangely enough, there were two things that I discussed as part of that advice. And one was social media and one was friends. And when the session ended, I asked them, tell me what, in the 2 hours that I spent with them, what were some of the things that stuck with them? And would you believe that a couple of them said, and I know that it was a kind of a universal thought, that thinking around the company that you keep and how much it matters, and to make sure that you are, yes, you're friendly with everybody, but your friends should have the same life goals as you. You'd be surprised how many of them were just blown away by that. And I guess I just want to encourage the parents who are listening. So while we know that, and as adults, we understand that very clearly, don't be surprised if our children
was. I'm not sure.
Did I disappear for a second? Am I back?
Yes,
the audio is back. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It must be a weather event. Yeah. So don't be surprised that it's just not something that they're thinking about, and I'm encouraging you to talk to them about it. Right now, going back to Pauline, back to your question about social media. So I was also talking to them about social media, and I'm going to respond to it in two parts, right? One, what I tell my son, and then two, I want to talk about that session that I had, right? So I always tell my son that, listen, don't believe anything you hear on social media, okay? Social media, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily everything that's not true. It's just that it's very difficult for you to determine what is accurate versus, in our adult language, fake news, right? And I tell him, when you hear things and you think it's important, come and talk to us about it. And if we don't know the answer, we can find the answers from people who are knowledgeable. So, for example, if strangely enough, he asked me something about medicine at some point, and I said, no problem, let's go find a doctor, right? So if he asks a question of a financial nature, and I don't know, I will talk to people like Jason and help him get the answer. So, one, it's really to ground them in social media and make sure that they're listening to credible sources, right? So that's number one. Number two, I want to go back to that session that I was referring to with social media. And what I try to explain to the students who are there is that make sure when you're spending your time on social media, you are clear in your mind who is making the money. Because when you are sitting there spending hours and just scrolling through social media, you are not making any money. You are consuming content. Whereas the people you are watching, they are creating something, and therefore they're the ones making money. So always be clear in your mind where the perspective is, and ask yourself, which would you rather be doing? Would you rather be creating something, and it doesn't need to be social media content. It can be creating anything, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, versus simply consuming content, and all you're doing is wasting the most important years and most important hours, quite frankly, of your young life, right? So social media has a lot of positives, but we as parents need to guide our children through the use of social media so that they spend their time really productively.
Thank you so much for that, Kerri, and shout out to Nigel, who's joining us on LinkedIn from Digger Martin. So we're going to go on our final break, but before we do, I'll just put the question out there so our guests could have a rummage in their brain to answer the question. If you had to give one piece of financial advice to other fathers out there, what would it be? So let's think about that for a minute, and we'll answer that question right after the break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand financial literacy and education. If you're joining us today from Facebook, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we are discussing how can fathers teach kids about money in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're joined by Jason and Kerri. We have not that much time, so we're going to get straight into it. If you missed any of the conversation that we've had over the last 50 plus minutes, once this live is ended, you could check it on the replay on YouTube and LinkedIn, as well as we do have a rebroadcast on TV6 on Mondays at 8 p.m. So before the break, I asked a question, so I'm just going to ask the question again. If you had to give one piece of financial advice to other fathers out there, what would it be? So we're going to start with Jason. Oh, wait, let's just take off your mic. There we go. Let's start again.
Okay, all right. Oh, thanks. So I guess I'd say this, right? In terms of there are many things I could say to answer this question, but I guess the starting point I would say would be, as a father, you need to, in a sense, lead the conversation, because remember, for the child wouldn't know this is something that they need to have a life skill about. And I said one simple mechanism I found personally that helps with that is playing Monopoly. So I found playing Monopoly created an environment that dealt with a couple of things. One, you're using physical money bills in the game. Two, the game teaches that of course, we're all familiar with Monopoly, right? So their properties, they all have different prices, and they all even though they have different prices, and because the neighborhood, the value of a neighborhood may not be reflected in what you have to actually pay for it. And then, there's rental income involved, and there's a penalty for a player, and there's a benefit for another player. So what I found with that, in that game of Monopoly, is a mechanism to then teach principles simply without it feeling like a classroom. And I found that having done that repeatedly, I saw how there's a transmission of principles to the child. So the child sees that money could increase or decrease. They see that they have to purchase something and get a return. And there's also an appreciation that not everything that is being offered to be purchased is of the same worth and value. And so there's a takeaway there as well. What I'll also encourage is, and it's kind of linked to the question I was asked before about social media, is I think critical in any parenting with money or otherwise is teaching independent thinking and teaching asking questions and encouraging asking questions. So I think independent thinking is critical. So even if you see something on social media, even if you see something in the classroom, even if you see something in the workplace, even if you see something in a conversation with your friends, think about it independently and ask questions. Why is this so? What is the benefit of this? What is the return I'm going to get for this? Is this worth the price that has been asked for? How do I make this profitable? What is the return on this investment? Does this make sense for me? Do I understand the opportunity? So the asking of questions, I think I am highly encouraged as a parent. And what it does is forces you, the parent, to get answers and not be afraid to say, well, I don't know, but I'll get the answer. And I think that honesty and then that curiosity and that encouraging curiosity and independent thinking and the constant learning and the tone that not be afraid to learn if you don't know, I think goes a long way with the understanding of money and understanding of life and the critical life skill for life in general. And I think that's where I'll start. And I do it almost all the time. So I'm gonna stop there to give Kerri a chance.
Thank you for that. And it's interesting when you say it's okay to say I don't know, because anybody who's watching this and follows the comedian and influencer Kyle know that it's very interesting as a millennial to have your parents say I don't know. It's not very common. So I'm gonna just leave it there. All right. So we're gonna redirect that same question to Kerri. If you had to give one piece of financial advice to the fathers out there, what would it be?
Well, I think ask yourself today, if you were to look back and say, and if you would think, listen, if I knew that then, it would have made a difference. I think use that to guide your relationship and your discussions with your children so that we could start that education from much earlier on. So what I'm getting at is that, you know, we need as adults to make sure our children don't make the same mistakes that we did. And when we can simply apply the things that we've learned today and talk to them about it now, it'll make a huge difference for them in the future. So that's number one. Don't be afraid to pass on the lessons that you've learned. And it might have been that you've learned it because you made a mistake, but don't be afraid to pass on that lesson to your children. That's number one. But most importantly would be number two. Don't think that they would not understand. In my own interactions with children and young adults, I am just blown away with the things that I am able to talk to them about if I conduct financial literacy sessions, and they grasp the concepts, they understand it, they're interested, they're engaged. Don't underestimate them at all. Their ability to grasp the concepts that we think might be challenging, you would be surprised. They jump on it really quickly, and they are engaged. They want to be part of the conversation. So Paulina, I think those are the two things that I would say are the two connected things I would ask all parents to think about doing.
Well, thank you so much. I think those incredibly important for parents out there. And just like give us one last sentence, both of our guests, Kerri and Jason, for those out there who may be feeling frustrated, feeling like, you know, there's no end, because let's be honest, like having a tiny human to take care of is a huge responsibility that never ends, even as they become adults. So just give the fathers out there, you know, one piece of encouraging advice that they'll take away from this session. Jason?
I would say I like how Kerri ended there by as a parent sharing your own personal life lessons. I think that kind of humanizes you as a parent, because even though we may at times be superhuman to the kids, they also need to see us struggle and overcome, and share that we also make mistakes and find ways to solve problems. So the last piece I would say is, you know, go back to some of the fundamentals. Sit down with a notepad, a pen, a calculator, and talk through a plan of action for maybe some financial goal. We saw the question earlier with your friend with the tablets, and the kids trying to save money towards a tablet. That could be any goal. It could be a vacation, it could be a house, it could be their education. The parent should involve the kid and say, listen, this is our plan. We're gonna save some money. This is how we're gonna save. We might have to borrow to fill some of the gaps. And I wish we had more time, because there's so much we could talk about still on this kind of front. But I know Bad is doing a tremendous job over the series. We may have to invest, and this is some of the ways we can invest, and this is what we expect the return to be. But it should be a conversation that is led by the parent, that they should be bold about it, they should be human about it, they should be vulnerable, and they share their own mistakes and share their own journey. But some fundamental things: pen, paper, calculator, and write down, this is how we earn, this is some of our income, this is how we spend money. When we go to the grocery, these are the things we're going to focus on as priorities. We have $100 to spend on something that you may want. And I just put it on a number, it'll be $100, right? But you know, I think when that starts a conversation about value for money, it starts a conversation about why we spend money in certain ways and why we don't spend money. And as a parent, don't be afraid to say no, but give a reason why. And it can't be because you're vexed, or because I say so, or because it's in anger. But it should be a no that is said with a rational and an understanding, so they could understand why, and they could also learn from that moment the things that you're managing as a parent.
Thanks for that, Jason. So Kerri, last words?
Yep. So when we were growing up, there weren't many resources available. There are so many resources available now. For example, just this BAT outreach, but there are many more resources that are available. You just have to do a quick search, and you're going to find a lot of credible information and a lot of people who are willing to help now. So there's really less reason to stay frustrated. Don't believe that things are like they were 20, 30 years ago. There's a lot of information available now, a lot of people willing to help.
Well, thanks for that, Kerri. And on that note, I want to thank you so much, Jason Julian from First Citizen and Kerri Maharaj from Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation for joining us today and sharing insight into how fathers teach kids about money in Trinidad and Tobago. I think one of the biggest takeaways I got from this session, fathers are human. So we make mistakes and we just build a relationship along the way with our children, our kids, and we go through it together, right? So sign up to be notified for our next live show via the links in the comments. And this is a great example of ways to, learn about financial literacy and education. And as always, be sure to like and follow our pages across social media. And now we're on TV6, so you have no excuse, people. Let's look out for these shows. Don't miss a single live one. And thanks again for joining us. So see you soon. Bye.